Thanks, everybody. So I saw that the theme was freedom and independence and 4th of July. And like a lot of Black people, it's a very conflicting holiday for us because my ancestors were not freed on 4th of July. And, okay, better. And the service for other ancestors, one other ancestor, his service in the Revolutionary War allotted him 1,000 acres or more in Alabama and Georgia, what is now Alabama and Georgia, where he could amass 222 slaves. So it's never really, I've just kind of been, I'm happy to be an American. I'm proud of our country, but, we got a past. You still can't hear me? Okay, thank you. That's better. Better? Okay. So, is the mic on?
Yes.
Okay. But I was thinking about freedom, and this country had a few false starts after the revolution, but they did a really good thing in establishing the Constitution and Article 1, which is freedom of the press. And that's been my life for the last 30-some years, is the freedom of the press. And how this relates to July 4th is that was also a really sad day for me about 15 years ago. I had always written for the business department. I did a lot of things on corrupt businesses. I did business profiles. I was never one of those reporters who went out and followed the ambulances or went to the scenes. The only time I ever had a dead body in any interview was I went into a funeral home to interview about the takeover of family funeral homes by these big corporations, right? And that was it. I didn't do that kind of reporting. But when I moved to Fort Myers, it was a smaller paper. And there were times that we were called in, even if it wasn't our beat, like for hurricanes and things like that. But one 4th of July, I got a call from an editor, and he said, hey, the Saturday reporter is on the east side. It was Lehigh Acres, so he's way out east. And there's a drowning at Fort Myers Beach. Can you go down and cover the drowning? You have no idea how much I did not want to do this. But I did. I said, okay, I grabbed my notebook, get in the car, drive down to Fort Myers Beach. And the drowning is at the shrimp docks. So I come in, I see the policeman there, and I said, hey, yeah, I'm from the press. And he says, oh, he's over there. And so I walk over, and there's this young Black man laying just out on the deck of this concrete in Fort Myers Beach. And he's really he's such a handsome guy, and he's maybe 28, 27, and he is, well proportioned and looks healthy, and his mouth was slightly open, and I could see he had just perfect teeth and no filling. And I thought to myself, this is someone's son, and someone who had a family and was loved, and I don't know how he ended up in this situation. So I went up, and he had been working on the shrimp boat. And so I went up and I interviewed the people who had been there, and they said, oh yeah, a pack of cigarettes fell in the water, and he jumped in the water, and then he just drowned. And I said, well, did you see him flailing? And they said, yeah, but he told us he had been in the Navy, so we figured he could swim. But they'd all been drinking, so they're not really using their heads, and he drowns. And so I said, what was his name? And they didn't know. They had called him by a nickname that wasn't even a derivative of a real name. And so then the captain came up, and he actually showed some remorse, But he said, I got drunk and I went downstairs and I was sleeping, but nobody came to wake me up. And I could have saved him, but, you know. And I said, well, how long's he been working for you? And he said, just over a week. And I said, well, what's his paperwork say, what his name is? He said, I didn't do the paperwork. We called him Butch or whatever. And he knew nothing about him, absolutely nothing. And so I went back, and it ended up not even really being a story. It was a brief. You know, man working on a shrimp boat dies, unidentified, drowned. You know, that was it, a few lines. So about 3 or 4 days later, the guy that does cover cops and crime and stuff like that, I said, hey, did they find out who this kid was? And he said, I'll check. And he checks, he says, no, they don't know. And I said, okay. And then 2 weeks later, I asked again, and they still don't know. And I said, well, what are they doing to find out? And he said, you got me. And I said, well, tell them that I'm going to write an article about how this kid's been there nearly a month, and we have no idea who he is, and you guys have really not made finding out a priority. So the next day, the reporter friend comes in, he says, hey, they found who he was, and his fingerprints were on file because he'd been sleeping in the park, and they picked him up for vagrancy, and they had all the information about him. His family's coming to get him. And so it ended up, you know, still being a really sad story, but it makes me proud to be an American where we have the freedom of the press and we can force people into action. And we can be able to do that because of the revolution and our Constitution. And so my conflicting feelings on 4th of July are tempered by the fact that it really did kind of turn out all right.